What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Today we're going to walk through the draft, talk about the worst pick in every single round. For ADP here, I'm going to be using an average of ESPN, Yahoo, NFL.com, Underdog, and Sleeper, which you can all see for free on my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. So let's start things off in round 3. I was going to do rounds 1 and 2. I sat there for like 15 minutes just trying to come up with a single name, but I couldn't. ADPs in rounds 1 and 2 are incredibly accurate, and there really just are no wrong choices. Do I have leans? Certainly. Players that I don't draft as much? Sure. But in terms of bad picks, there are none. If you're in a general vicinity of ADP, you're not at pick 5 picking someone who has an ADP of 20, if you're in that general spot, it's a fine pick. Go with your gut in the first 2 rounds. Round 3. Breece Hall, average ADP is 31st. That is roughly, I'm going to do, say that as opposed to like a 12-team league, right? So round 3 here is 12-team league, round 4, 12-team league, not in a 10-team league. It's roughly the mid-3rd round, and I have him ranked now as an early 4th round pick. Made that adjustment after the ESPN article kind of came out, basically confirming things that we figured would happen before, weren't 100% certain with, but basically they are expecting to start the season that Dalvin Cook is going to have a very strong workload on the ground, and they're not going to overload Breece Hall. Makes sense, right? I mean, Breece Hall coming off a major injury, someone that they plan on being their featured back for years to come. Why on earth would they rush him back? Why on earth would they overload him? They gave Dalvin Cook a lot of money. They gave him a good amount. He's going to be very involved this season. With how involved he's going to be, even projecting Breece Hall to be highly efficient, I just figured you had to knock down those carries. They're not going to give him too many, and that bumped him into the 4th round. So probably the most risky, and at this point, the least upside pick in round 3 as well, because, unless they have a Dalvin Cook injury, even if that happens, they still are not going to overload Breece Hall. They will bring someone else in, maybe, but they would probably just go with the running backs they have right now. But they would utilize another back. It wouldn't be a situation where it's like, oh, Dalvin went down, now let's overload Breece. The reason they brought him in because they didn't want to overload Breece Hall. Round 4. Everything's honestly pretty accurate right now. My biggest difference is TJ Hockenson. He's going at pick 44. I haven't picked 48, so not a huge difference. But again, that's the largest difference in round 4. Mainly, it's should we be concerned about this ear infection? Apparently, it's starting to clear up, but he's been missing camp for a while. This is very valuable missed time for Hockenson, and we still have a relatively small sample size of him on the Vikings. It's a good sample size, a sample size to where if we extrapolate it over a full season, will be a very good pick in this range. But I've kind of dropped him more recently. I think I would rather draft him in round 5 just because of some of these concerns. I'm thinking Addison can command more targets than Adam Thielen was last season. Kind of seems like Osborne's taken a step up. And so you kind of consider that. They obviously have Justin Jefferson, so there's only so much of a ceiling for Hockenson. And so, I don't know, I just kind of started thinking about it a little bit more, and I wasn't super confident in spending a 4th round pick in a redraft league on TJ Hockenson. I think 5th round makes a lot more sense. Again, still has that very clear upside. He could have 100 receptions this season. I'm a little concerned with this weird ear infection where his equilibrium is off and he's just not able to get back on the practice field. Again, valuable missed time. That's not the end of the world, but when is he going to come back? Round 5, George Kittle, another tight end here. I think the last tight end on the list. He's going 50th overall. I have him 66th. He's also the 4th tight end off boards. He's my tight end 6 behind Darren Waller and Kyle Pitts. And it's just target competition and the fact that I think I like Waller and Pitts a little bit more than the market does. Kind of looking at the ceiling for Kittle, he needs an injury. Especially in round 5. If Kittle was going in round 12, of course he doesn't need an injury, right? But to pay off a round 5 ADP and to return value on that as a tight end, he can't have Debo, McCaffrey, and Ayuk fully healthy all season. That just can't happen. And I don't want to spend a 5th round pick on a tight end where that's the case. Hopefully Hockenson can fall into round 5. You can take him. But if not, wait for Darren Waller, wait for Kyle Pitts, because I project them even higher than George Kittle. Waller could dominate the target share for the Giants. We could see a world where Kittle is 4th on the target share for the 49ers, and they're not even a high volume passing attack. So a relatively low floor for Kittle. And we all know he's always had a low weekly floor as well. I'm talking the season long floor is lower than people think, but even the weekly floor for George Kittle, like he has these explosion games, but he has plenty of games where he has like 2 for 30, 2 for 40. I know that's just like the case with tight ends, but in round 5, I want a little bit better than that. Round 6, Mike Evans. I didn't think that I would come to this conclusion, but he's going 70th overall. I have him ranked 80th overall, so that's 10 spots back. Quarterback play is obviously just a massive concern with him, and I think it impacts Mike Evans more than impacts Chris Godwin. Also, you look at last year and you're like, well, I mean, first of all, I know Brady wasn't that great last season, but he was 13th in points per game. So you're like, okay, Brady having like the worst season of his career, he was still 13th in points per game. It was because he had over 43 fantasy points in his last game played last season, before the last week of his season. Then they didn't play the final week. But before his last week, he was 31st in points per game, has an explosion, goes up to 13th. I don't really think we can consider that he was a high-end wide receiver 2 last season. For the vast majority of the year, he was producing in like the low 30s for points per game. He's now going off the boards as the wide receiver 30. You look at last year, he had 8 half PPR points or less in 8 of 15 weeks. Again, he's got Baker, he's got Trask. He doesn't have Tom Brady anymore. Even in Brady's worst seasons of his career, he's significantly better than Baker and Trask. And like I said before, I think it hurts him more than Godwin because he needs those balls downfield. When a quarterback is bad, the accuracy doesn't get better deep downfield, right? It gets better a little bit in the short area. That's where Godwin can kind of excel. Deep downfield on the sideline, you need these accurate throws. I don't know. I don't see it happening with Mike Evans this season. Round 7. We've got DeAndre Swift. He's going 77th overall. I have him 97th, so 20 spots back. Lack of carries is really just my biggest concern with DeAndre Swift. I've talked about this before, but if we look at just like camp carries, they're just not involving him in the ground game. And I know people want to point out, they're like, well, that doesn't really matter much. And I kind of agree. It doesn't really matter all that much. But I think the major point is, if he was actually going to overtake like the Miles Sanders role from last season, which is not going to happen, obviously. Like Miles Sanders was basically only an early down running back. For you to think that DeAndre Swift is going to turn into an only early down running back, that makes zero sense. That is not what his game is. He is good in the receiving game as an explosive change of pace back. That's what he is for DeAndre Swift. Why would he completely flip and only get carries this season? That makes no sense. So then you'd say, okay, well, maybe he'll be a featured back, right? Why would that happen either? They're not going to go to a featured running back when they have Penny, they have Gainwell, they have running backs that they trust, that they like, and they've seen DeAndre Swift was literally traded away from the Lions because he couldn't handle a large workload. What are they going to come right away and give him a large workload? That doesn't make any sense. And so I think he's just going to be their passing down back, a passing down specialist. And then there's also reports that in like the 4-minute drill, 2-minute drill, they actually like Gainwell. Like they think Gainwell just knows the offense well enough, has produced well in the past in that role to where they want to keep him in that role. And so if Swift is only a passing down back on a team that's going to win a ton, and he doesn't even have 2-minute and 4-minute drill upside, where's the upside at pick 77 in the 7th round? I don't see it. 8th round, A.J. Dillon, going 96th. I have him 105th, 9 spots back. It's just tough for me to get behind the Packers' backup running back this late. Like, if we look to last season, many of you drafted him. I actually liked him last year because I thought that, with Aaron Rodgers, with the lack of wide receiver weapons they had in this offense, they were going to lean on these running backs and produce well. Now, Aaron Jones, I think, had a slightly positive playoff rate and championship rate over expectations. So Aaron Jones ends up being a good pick last year. But if you drafted A.J. Dillon, you couldn't start him. I mean, you tried to a few times. He would get like 15 carries for 50 yards and no touchdown, no receptions. And you'd be like, okay, so there's my 5 points. And you just couldn't trust it. So for us to think that they go into this year, they've got Watson improving as a player. They've got Dobbs improving as a player. They're drafting Jaden Reed, Luke Musgrave they're getting on the offense. Those are targets being taken away. And then you're transitioning into Jordan Love, who by all accounts, and any sort of mental thinking here is going to produce the conclusion that he is not as good as Aaron Rodgers. He can do different things that Rodgers wouldn't do, but he is significantly worse than Aaron Rodgers. And so for us to look at A.J. Dillon and be like, the only thing that's changed this season, you're still the backup. The only thing that's changed is you have more target competition and a worse quarterback, and we couldn't start you before, but we're going to take you in round 8 in redraft. I don't buy it. Absolutely needs an Aaron Jones injury. Round 8 is too early. Round 9, Michael Thomas, going 104th overall. I have him 108. So not too bad. It's just such an uninspiring pick. I feel like it's such a floor pick, and we're starting to get close to double-digit rounds. We're at round 9. I don't want floor picks. I want players who can really outproduce their ADP, and I think people see the name for Michael Thomas, and they think that he can. He just kind of can't. I mean, Olave is the number 1, so maybe Olave could like tear his ACL, and they have to force feed Michael Thomas 10, 11 targets per game. Then he outproduces his ADP. But like shy of that, it's not going to happen. Like if you look at his 3 healthy games last season, he was horrific in success rate versus man and versus zone. He's now a year older, coming off yet another season-ending injury. Massive injury concerns for Michael Thomas, and just again, the ceiling isn't there. Like he will need, given the type of player that he is, a very, very low ADOT player that cannot win downfield. And last year showed he couldn't beat man coverage, but we'll see if he can develop that this season a little bit or get that back this season. I'm skeptical. But the point is, he's not a downfield player. So he literally needs 10 to 12 targets per game to be producing numbers that you're trusting in fantasy. Because if he's hovering around 7, 8 targets, those are very close to the line of scrimmage. Those have zero upside. He's going to catch a good percentage of them, maybe like 70% of them. But when he catches them, they're only going to go for like 10 or 11 yards. And so if he has 7 or 8 targets and he's only catching around 5 to 6 of them, he's going to post a lot of 5 for 50 and 6 for 60 games, like a lot of those. And if he's not going to be like a prolific touchdown scorer, then what are we doing here? A bunch of 5 for 50s is not what we want on a lot of targets. 7, 8 targets a week is a lot. He'll have some where he only has 4 or 5. Those are even lower. Like if you think that he's going to be commanding double-digit targets, sure, draft him. I don't think that's the case. Round 10, we've got Kadarius Toney going 109th overall. I have him 118. So ADP finally approaching where I have Kadarius Toney, but it needs to go a little bit further. I have talked about him a lot, so we don't want to go too in-depth here, but just dreadful success rates across the entire route tree. Terrible success rates versus man coverage, press coverage, zone coverage. He's just very quick, very good in the open field, and so you give him end-arounds, screen passes, and screen looks. And until he develops to more than that, we can't really trust him in fantasy. And he needed camp to develop into more than that because we have not seen it thus far. Going to be really, really difficult to trust a gadget player in your starting lineup in a redraft league, even if you're drafting it on Kansas City. I understand the offense is really good, but it's a gadget player. Historically, we haven't found great success drafting gadget players who need schemed looks. They're not going to scheme him 10 targets a game. So he doesn't have a high weekly ceiling unless he scores multiple touchdowns, which you can't exactly predict either, right? So there are going to be a lot of games where you're like, yeah, he should go off, but they only scheme him 2 to 3 looks that week. And so he only has 2, 3, 4 touches, and that's not something you can trust in fantasy. Round 11, Jerick McKinnon, staying with Kansas City. He's going 126th overall. I am 164th. He is a 31-year-old running back that has 672 total rushing yards over the last 5 years combined. He had 2 games over 10 touches last season, and then everyone thought they were saving him for the playoffs. In the playoffs, he had 2.5, 2.8, and 6.4 half PPR points. I just don't see the appeal. Again, he's 31, didn't just turn 31. He is a good 31 years old, has been producing 672 total rushing yards over the last 5 years. He's not going to do anything on the ground. You're relying all of it on the receptions. Even when you add in the receptions, 2 games over 10 touches last season, and they were not saving him for the playoffs. That was just the production he was getting. He's now a year older. Like, I don't see any appeal with McKinnon. He'd need like 4 dudes to get hurt and for them not to add a free agent to actually break out this season. Round 12, Adam Thielen going 143rd. I'm 149, so not too bad, but he turns 33 on Tuesday. Yards per target have dropped in 5 straight years. He's joining a new team. That new team has a rookie quarterback. It's a high-end prospect, but it's a prospect, right? Bryce Young is not going to enter the NFL and be an elite quarterback. It's going to take some time. We know historically rookie quarterbacks struggle to support high-end fantasy wide receivers. They pretty much never support multiple, but they struggle to produce really high-end fantasy results. And so I think Thielen could maybe return 12th round value, but if he does that, he provides no value, right? Because you weren't planning on starting him. And so if he produces 12th round at his ADP, even if he slightly outproduces round 10, round 11, that's still not someone you're starting. I just don't think we're ever going to get to a point this season where you're like, yeah, Adam Thielen, throw him in the starting lineup. I feel really good about that. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think it's possible for some of the wide receivers on this team. I don't see it from Adam Thielen. I would target a higher upside wide receiver in that range. Round 13, Damien Harris. ADP is 146. I have him 158th, and I honestly want to move him down even further than that. There's a very real chance that Latavius Murray's the Bills running back 2 this season. And I think people kind of put it at maybe 15%. I think it's at this point 60-40. I think that Damien Harris has the edge, 60%. But if we're talking about a 40% chance that he's the number 3 running back on Buffalo, why would we want that? I mean, Latavius Murray has 8 straight seasons of at least 115 carries. He has at least 140 carries in 7 of the last 8 years. He's better in the receiving game than Damien Harris. He rarely misses time due to injury. Coaches love him. He's produced on multiple teams, even joining that team during the season. I don't know. I just think that teams like Murray so much, and he's been so consistent, and they can just rely on him to be fine and not screw things up, that I think there's a real chance he wins the number 2 job over Damien Harris. And if that's the case, and you really want to draft a backup here from some upside, why not wait until round 18 on Underdog? Well, literally, I don't think he gets drafted anywhere, but if you're in a really deep format, wait till round 20, grab Latavius Murray. There's your upside if you want a Buffalo backup running back. Don't spend a round 13 pick on Damien Harris. Again, at best, he's number 2. I think he could be number 3. In rounds 14 plus, no such thing as a bad pick. I mean, even round 13, if you really want to go all in on Damien Harris, I'm not against it. I don't think it's going to impact your team. I think there are much better picks to make, and I wouldn't do it personally. But we're in round 13, 14, 15, 16. Many times this is going to be your defense. It's going to be your kicker. And so those aren't bad picks, right? You just got to fill out your roster. But shoot for the moon, right? Don't go for floor picks. That's why I talked about, I think Damien Harris is a floor pick. Adam Thielen is a floor pick. Jerick McKinnon's the ultimate floor pick. He's not going to do anything. Kadarius Toney, I do not think has the upside people think. And so it's when you're in this general range, I don't like players because I can't envision starting them in fantasy. So every time you're drafting someone in this range, just think about what is their path to actually starting. Not outproducing their ADP, being I think, he's coming off the board as wide receiver 60. I think he can finish 50th. You're not starting that, right? You need to start someone who's probably a top 30 wide receiver. So draft someone who has the upside to be a top 30 wide receiver, not someone who can outperform 60 and finish 50th. So again, no bad picks. You're not going to lose your league no matter what you do in rounds 14 plus, but you got to think about ceiling. Is there an outcome where that player can really be good, finish as, let's say, a wide receiver 2 in fantasy, or at least close the season as a wide receiver 2? Maybe you're looking at rookies in this range being well, they're probably not going to do a whole lot, but maybe they will. Maybe there's a chance that in the second half of the season, they break out and have a really good close. So if you want to see my complete rankings for every scoring format, 2 wide receiver, 3 wide receiver rankings, all that stuff, customizable rankings, you can see that on my website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. And if you want to get access to that for free, you can check out my Underdog promo in the description box down below. All you got to do is sign up for your first Underdog account today using promo code FFA and make a minimum $10 deposit. That's it. And then the next morning, you'll get a login and get all my draft rankings for free, all my Underdog content for the entire season for free, and they'll double whatever you put down as a deposit. You put $20 in, they'll turn it to 40 just to make it even better. I know we're in the heart of draft season right now, so take advantage of this deal. It is the best in the industry. So that'll do it for this one. Hope you all did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting the like button, and how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.